You are watching a man's career, reputation, and life fall apart in real time. You just don't know whose yet. On one afternoon, Officer Harlan Shaw made a decision every cop fears. He chose the wrong target. He saw a black man in a luxury car and assumed he was a criminal. He had no idea he was staring at one of the FBI's most decorated agents, Special Agent Silas Reed. What happens in the next short time is not just a misunderstanding. It is a brutal collision of ego and justice that ends with a twist so shocking it brought an entire police department to its knees. Watch closely. The hunter is about to become the hunted. The engine of the black Chevy Tahoe ticked softly as it cooled, the only sound in the otherwise silent cul-de-sac of Oak Creek Sycamore Drive. It was an affluent neighborhood. Manicured lawns cut with geometric precision, American flags drooping lazily on porch poles, and the kind of silence that cost $500,000 to buy. Inside the Tahoe, Silas Reed sat with the stillness of a predator waiting for the wind to change. He adjusted the cuffs of his suit jacket, Italian wool tailored to hide the Sig Sauer P226, holstered under his left arm. On the passenger seat lay a folder stamped confidential, a lukewarm cup of coffee, and a pair of high-powered binoculars. Silas, known as Jay, to the very few friends he kept outside the bureau, checked his watch. He wasn't here for a drug bust or a bank robbery. He was here for something much harder to prove. White-collar corruption involving city zoning permits, organized crime, money laundering. The target was a man named Harlan Lang, a city councilman living 3 doors down. Silas was in his 40s with skin the color of deep mahogany and a shaved head that gleamed slightly in the filtered sunlight. He had spent many years in the FBI, moving from the chaotic gang task forces of Chicago to the surgically precise white-collar crimes division. He knew how to wait. Patience was the primary weapon of his trade. He took a sip of the coffee, grimacing at the temperature, and scanned the street. A delivery truck rumbled past. A woman walked a golden retriever. Normal, boring, perfect. Then the rearview mirror caught a flash of white and blue. A police cruiser, Unit 402 of the Oak Creek Police Department, turned slowly onto the street. It didn't pass. It crawled. The shark-like nose of the Ford Explorer dipped as the brakes engaged, coming to a halt 2 car lengths behind Silas's Tahoe. Silas let out a long, weary sigh through his nose. He knew the drill. He was a black man sitting in a tinted SUV in a neighborhood where the demographics skewed heavily white. He had hoped the generic government plates would be enough of a "do not disturb" sign, but apparently today was going to be complicated. He watched the mirrors. The cruiser's doors opened, 2 officers. The driver was a wall of a man. Officer Harlan Shaw. Silas didn't know his name yet, but he knew the type. Shaw walked with his chest puffed out, thumbs hooked near his belt, his sunglasses reflecting the suburban glare. He was in his 40s, heavy-set but muscular, with a thick mustache that looked like it belonged in the 1980s. His body language screamed territorial aggression. The passenger was younger, female, Officer Nora Hale. She looked like she was barely out of the academy, her uniform slightly too big, her hand resting nervously near her radio. She trailed Shaw by a few steps, glancing around the street as if expecting an ambush. "Here we go," Silas whispered to himself. He kept his hands visible, resting them at the 10 and 2 positions on the steering wheel. He lowered the driver's side window as Shaw approached. Shaw didn't say hello. He didn't ask how Silas was doing. He leaned down, placing a meaty hand on the roof of the Tahoe, and peered inside through his aviators. "License and registration," Shaw barked, no preamble. Silas turned his head slowly. He kept his voice calm, the practiced baritone of a man who had negotiated with hostage takers. "Good afternoon, officer. Is there a problem?" "I said license and registration," Shaw repeated louder this time. He leaned in further, sniffing the air inside the car like a bloodhound. "You don't live here." "I'm working," Silas said calmly. "I'm a federal agent. My credentials are in my inside jacket pocket. I'm going to reach for them now." This was the protocol. Declare, describe, move. Don't you move a muscle. Shaw's hand dropped to his holster. The snap of the retention strap being thumbed off echoed in the quiet street. "I didn't ask for a life story, I asked for ID. Get out of the car." Silas frowned. This was escalating faster than usual. "Officer, I am identifying myself as a special agent with the FBI. I am on an active surveillance operation. If I get out of the car, I break cover." "Break cover?" Shaw laughed, a harsh barking sound. "You're sitting in a suspicious vehicle in a high-priority neighborhood idling. We've had reports of break-ins. You fit the description." Silas knew for a fact there had been no break-ins in this zip code for some time. He checked the crime stats daily. "Which description is that, officer? The one that says black male in a car?" Shaw's face reddened instantly. The vein in his neck bulged. He ripped the door handle. It was locked. "Open this door or I break the window," Shaw shouted. Officer Hale stepped forward tentatively. "Harlan, maybe let him show the ID first. He said he's a Fed." "Shut up, Hale," Shaw snapped without looking at her. "He's stalling. He's probably ditching dope or a piece right now. Open the door." Silas calculated his options. If he refused, Shaw would smash the window, drag him out, and the scene would be even bigger. If he complied, he lost control of the situation. But he saved the taxpayer the cost of a window and potentially saved his own life if Shaw was as trigger-happy as he looked. "Okay," Silas said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming cold and hard. "I am unlocking the door. I am stepping out, but you need to listen very carefully to what I tell you next." "Get out!" Silas unlocked the door. Before he could even swing it fully open, Shaw grabbed him by the lapel of his expensive suit and yanked. Silas stumbled as he was hauled onto the asphalt. He was tall and in peak physical condition, a former college linebacker, but he allowed himself to be moved. Resistance now would give Shaw the excuse he was desperately fishing for. "Hands on the hood now!" Shaw slammed Silas against the hot metal of the Tahoe. The impact rattled Silas's teeth, but he didn't grunt. He spread his legs and placed his hands on the roof, fingers spread. "My badge," Silas said clearly, speaking loud enough for the body cam on Shaw's chest to pick it up perfectly, "is in my left interior pocket. My service weapon is holstered under my left arm. Do not reach for it unless you want a federal inquiry on your desk by morning." "Gun!" Shaw shouted, ignoring the context. "He's got a gun. Hale, cover me." Haley drew her weapon but pointed it low, looking terrified. "Harlan, he told you he has it. He's complying." "He's armed and dangerous." Shaw jammed his knee into the back of Silas's knee, forcing him to buckle. Silas went down to one knee, grit biting into his suit trousers. Shaw grabbed Silas's right wrist and twisted it behind his back, forcing it up near his shoulder blades. The pain was sharp. Rotator cuff tearing sharp. Silas gritted his teeth, his eyes narrowing. "Officer Shaw," Silas said, reading the nameplate now that it was inches from his face, "you are making a mistake that you cannot fix." "Check my pocket. Look at the credentials." "I'm checking for my safety first." Shaw patted Silas down aggressively. He found the gun. He ripped the Sig Sauer from the holster and skidded it across the pavement, scratching the finish of a government-issued firearm. "That is federal property," Silas stated. His voice was becoming robotic, detached. He was memorizing every second. Excessive force, failure to verify credentials, unlawful detention. Shaw finally reached into the jacket pocket. He pulled out the leather wallet. He flipped it open. The gold shield of the FBI gleamed in the sunlight. The photo ID next to it clearly read Darius Blake, Special Agent. Shaw stared at it. For a second, just one heartbeat, the silence returned. Hale leaned in. Seeing the badge, her eyes went wide. "Harlan," she whispered, "that's real. That's a real badge. Let him up." But Shaw's ego was a runaway train. He had already committed. He had shouted. He had used force. And neighbors were starting to come out onto their porches. Mrs. Kensington from number 42 was holding her iPhone up. A landscaping crew across the street had stopped their mowers and were watching. If Shaw backed down now, he looked like a fool. If he doubled down, he could claim the badge looked fake. He could claim Silas was resisting. In Shaw's mind, the truth was malleable. Shaw snapped the wallet shut and shoved it into his own pocket. "Fake," Shaw announced, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "Looks like a forgery to me. You get these online?" Silas's blood ran cold. This wasn't just incompetence anymore. This was malice. You know that is legitimate. Call your supervisor. Call the field office. The number is on the back of the card. I'm taking you in for impersonating a police officer, resisting arrest, and possession of an illegal firearm, Shaw said, pulling his handcuffs. Click, click, the steel bit into Silas's wrists. You are under arrest, Shaw sneered, leaning close to Silas's ear. You think a suit and a fake badge make you untouchable? Not in my town, boy. The racial undertone wasn't subtle. It was a sledgehammer. Silas stood up as Shaw hauled him by the chain of the cuffs. He turned to face the officer. Silas didn't look defeated. He looked like a judge passing a sentence. Officer Hale, Silas said, locking eyes with the rookie, you are witnessing a felony, deprivation of rights under color of law, Title 18, United States Code, Section 242. If you do not intervene, you are an accessory. Hale flinched. She looked at Shaw. Harlan, we should run the badge number. Dispatch can verify it in seconds. I said get him in the car. Shaw shoved Silas toward the cruiser. Silas didn't fight. He walked with dignity, despite his hands being bound behind him. He sat in the back of the cramped plastic seat of the police interceptor. The smell of stale vomit and disinfectant filled his nose. Shaw slammed the door. Inside the car, trapped behind the cage, Silas took a deep breath. He closed his eyes. He wasn't praying, he was counting. He knew something the officer didn't. Silas wasn't just on a stakeout, he was part of a coordinated takedown. His partner, Special Agent Elias Quinn, was 2 streets over in a surveillance van, and Silas was wearing a wire. Everything that had just happened, the racial slur, the dismissal of the badge, the refusal to check credentials, had been recorded and transmitted live to the Chicago field office. Silas looked at the digital clock on the dashboard of the cruiser. Elias Quentin, Silas whispered, knowing the microphone taped to his chest beneath his shirt would pick it up. Come get me and bring the cavalry. Outside, Shaw was strutting. He was playing to the audience. He walked over to Mrs. Kensington, who was still filming. Nothing to see here, folks. Just taking some trash off the street, Shaw boomed. He picked up Silas's gun from the pavement, handling it carelessly by the trigger guard, a massive safety violation, and tossed it onto the passenger seat of his cruiser. He turned to Hale. You drive. I'll write up the booking sheet on the way. We're going to charge him with everything we can think of. Disorderly conduct, assault on an officer. He didn't touch you, Harlan, Hale said, her voice trembling. He thought about it, Shaw grunted. Get in. They got into the car. Shaw turned around, grinning at Silas through the cage. Comfortable back there? Don't worry. The county lockup is worse. Silas looked at him, his face completely expressionless. You have a short time left, officer. A short time until what? Shaw laughed. Until your life ends, Silas said softly. Not your heartbeat, but your life as you know it. Shaw rolled his eyes. Yeah, tell it to the judge. He slapped the dashboard. Let's go, Hale. Hale put the car in drive. She released the brake, but before she could touch the gas, a siren chirped. Not the wail of a distant ambulance, the sharp, aggressive whoop-whoop of a federal siren. A massive black SUV, identical to Silas's, but with grille lights flashing red and blue, squealed around the corner, blocking the street in front of them. Then another came from behind, boxing them in. Then a third. Tires screeched. Doors flew open. Men in tactical gear with FBI emblazoned in bright yellow on their backs poured out. They didn't look like local cops. They moved with the terrifying speed of a SWAT team. Shaw froze. His hand went to his door handle, but he didn't open it. What is this? He stammered. Who are these guys? Silas leaned forward against the cage. A small, cold smile finally touched his lips. That, Silas said, is the twist. The silence of Sycamore Drive, previously disturbed only by the chirping of birds and the drone of lawnmowers, was now annihilated by a cacophony of shouting, slamming doors, and the crackle of high-frequency radios. Officer Harlan Shaw sat frozen in the driver's seat of his cruiser. His brain, usually quick to categorize the world into threat or civilian, was misfiring. The visual data in front of him didn't make sense. Police officers were the predators in this ecosystem, not the prey. Yet 3 black Chevrolet Suburbans had just executed a hard box maneuver on his vehicle, a tactic usually reserved for terrorists or cartel leaders. Harlan. Officer Nora Hale's voice was high, bordering on hysterical. Harlan, put the car in park. Put your hands up. Shut up, Shaw hissed, though his voice lacked its usual venom. It was thin, greedy. It's a mistake or a prank, probably a movie shoot. They didn't have permits for this. He was clinging to delusion like a life raft. Driver of the police cruiser, a voice boomed over a PA system from the lead SUV. It wasn't a request. It was the voice of God. Turn off the engine, throw the keys out the window, keep your hands visible. Inside the cage of the cruiser, Silas Reed watched the back of Shaw's neck. He saw the sweat beginning to bead at the hairline. I'd listen to them, Harlan, Silas said calmly. That's Special Agent Elias Quinn on the horn. He has a very low tolerance for nonsense. Shaw whipped his head around, his face purple. You set me up. You set this up, Silas replied. I tried to show you my ID. You chose not to look. Driver now, the PA system boomed again. Shaw's hands shook as he reached for the ignition. He turned the key. The engine died. He dropped the keys out of the window. They clattered onto the asphalt. Exit the vehicle. Walk backwards toward the sound of my voice. Hands on your head. Shaw opened the door. The heat of the afternoon hit him, but he felt cold. He stepped out. He looked to his left and right. There were at least a dozen agents. They wore heavy plate carriers over navy blue fatigues. They held M4 carbines at the low ready, barrels pointed at the ground, but ready to snap up in a millisecond. These weren't beat cops. These were the FBI's regional SWAT team, the heavy hitters called in for high-risk warrants. Shaw interlaced his fingers behind his head. He started walking backward. Officer Shaw? A voice spoke from behind him, not over a PA this time, but close. Stop. Get on your knees. I'm a police officer, Shaw shouted, finding a scrap of his old bravado. You can't do this. I have a badge. Get on your knees, or you will be put on your knees. Shaw crumbled. He sank to the asphalt, the gravel biting into his uniform pants. 2 agents moved in. They didn't treat him with the professional courtesy usually extended between law enforcement agencies. They treated him like a hostile combatant. One agent grabbed Shaw's left wrist, the other his right. They wrenched his arms down and slapped a pair of flex cuffs, heavy-duty plastic zip ties, onto his wrists. Hey, that's too tight, Shaw yelped. Quiet, the agent on his right growled. Meanwhile, a different team moved to the passenger side. Officer Hale was already out of the car crying, her hands high in the air. I didn't do anything, she sobbed. I told him to check the badge. Secure her, a tall agent commanded. Check her weapon. Is it clear? Clear, another agent shouted, removing Hale's sidearm. They didn't cuff her, but they escorted her away from Shaw, separating the witnesses. Then the focus shifted to the back seat of the cruiser. The tall agent, Elias Quinn, approached the rear door. He had red hair that was graying at the temples and a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite. He didn't look happy. He looked apocalyptic. He opened the rear door. You okay, Jay? Quinn asked, his voice instantly shifting from command shout to a concerned friend. Silas shifted in the plastic seat, offering his back to the door so Quinn could reach the handcuffs. Shoulders a bit tight. He wrenched it pretty good, but I'm fine. Key. Quinn barked over his shoulder. An agent handed him a universal handcuff key. Quinn unlocked the cuffs. Silas stepped out of the cruiser. He rubbed his wrists where red welts were already forming. He adjusted his suit jacket, brushed a speck of dust off his lapel, and took a deep breath of fresh air. He walked over to where Shaw was kneeling. The scene was a tableau of humiliation. Shaw, the king of his little patrol beat, was now kneeling before the man he had called boy minutes ago. Silas looked down at him. He didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He just looked disappointed. Officer Shaw, Silas said, I am Special Agent Darius Blake. I am the lead investigator on the RICO case targeting the corrupt zoning operations in this district. You have just compromised a long federal investigation. Shaw looked up, blinking against the sun. RICO? What are you talking about? You were just sitting there. I was waiting for a courier to deliver a package of cash to Councilman Lang, Silas said, pointing to the house 3 doors down. A courier who just drove past us while you were screaming about my registration. Shaw's face went pale. I didn't know. Ignorance is not a shield for incompetence, Silas said, and it certainly isn't a shield for civil rights violations. A black sedan pulled up to the perimeter. The door opened, and a man in a charcoal suit stepped out. He moved with the weight of authority that made even the SWAT team straighten up. "That's the ASAC," Quinn whispered to Silas. "Assistant Special Agent in Charge Harlan Crow. He was listening to the wire." The SAC Crow walked straight past the SWAT team, past Hale, and stopped in front of Shaw. Crow was a small man with glasses, but his eyes were like lasers. "Get him up," Crow ordered the agents. They hauled Shaw to his feet. Crow leaned in close. "Officer, in my many years with the Bureau, I have heard many things on a wire. But what I heard you say to Agent Blake today, that was special. That was a career-ending performance." "He resisted," Shaw sputtered, trying to lie one more time. "He refused to exit." Crow reached into his pocket and pulled out a digital recorder. He pressed a button. Shaw's voice, "You don't live here. You fit the description. Open this door or I break the window." Silas's voice, "I am a federal agent. My credentials are in my inside jacket pocket." Shaw's voice, "I didn't ask for a life story. Get out." Crow stopped the recording. He identified himself immediately. "You escalated immediately." And then Crow pressed the button again. Shaw's voice, "Not in my town, boy." The word hung in the air, heavy and ugly. The neighbors were all watching now. Mrs. Kensington was still filming. The landscaping crew had moved closer. Shaw realized, with a sinking feeling in his gut, that the audio wasn't just on Crow's recorder. It was likely on Silas's body wire, his own body camera, if he hadn't conveniently forgotten to turn it on, which he had this time, and potentially recorded by the neighbors. "You are going to be processed," Crow said coldly, "but not by your department. We are taking custody of you under federal statute." "You can't arrest a cop for doing his job," Shaw screamed, struggling against the flex cuffs. "I have qualified immunity." Silas stepped forward. Qualified immunity protects officials who make reasonable mistakes in the line of duty. It does not protect those who knowingly violate constitutional rights. "You saw the badge? You called it fake without verification? That is malice, Harlan. That pierces the veil of immunity." "Officer Hale," Crow called out. Hale jumped. "Yes, sir." "You suggested running the badge," Crow said. "We heard that on the wire. You tried to de-escalate." "I tried." He wouldn't listen, Hale stammered. "That fact is the only reason you aren't in cuffs right now," Crow said. "But you are going to write a statement, a very long, very detailed statement, and if you leave out a single comma, you will go down with him. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir. Absolutely, sir." Shaw looked at his partner. "Nora, don't tell them anything. Union rep, call the union rep." Hale looked at Shaw. She looked at the FBI agents. She looked at Silas, the man she had almost watched get beaten. "Shut up, Harlan," she said quietly. The processing of the scene took hours. Sycamore Drive was cordoned off with yellow tape that read "Federal Crime Scene," which confused the local residents who were used to seeing the blue and white tape of the Oak Creek PD. Shaw had been placed in the back of one of the Suburbans, isolated, air conditioning off. He was sweating, stewing, and waiting. Outside, the dynamic was shifting from tactical to legal. Silas stood by the hood of his Tahoe drinking a bottle of water Quinn had given him. His shoulder throbbed, and he knew he'd have a massive bruise the next day, but the adrenaline kept the pain distant. "So," Quinn said, leaning against the fender, "the courier's gone," Silas said, shaking his head. "Saw the lights, saw the cruiser, probably turned around 3 blocks back. Lang won't get the money today. He'll get spooked. He might start shredding documents." "We can get a warrant for Lang's place based on the wiretap we already have," Quinn suggested. "It's messy, but we might salvage it." "Maybe," Silas said. He looked at the police cruiser still parked crookedly in the street. "But right now I'm more interested in what we found in Shaw's car." "You mean besides your gun?" "I mean the laptop," Silas said. "When he was running my plates, I saw something on his screen. It wasn't the standard NCIC database." Quinn frowned. "What was it?" "It looked like a private messaging board, something encrypted. He didn't close it when he jumped out." Quinn flagged down a tech agent. "Get the data off the cruiser's laptop. Clone it now." While the tech team went to work, a new vehicle arrived. It was a standard Oak Creek police chief's car. Chief Victor Lang was a man in his 60s, trying desperately to hold on to a job that was rapidly becoming too complex for him. He walked under the yellow tape, looking like he was walking to his own execution. He approached ASAC Crow and Silas. "Agent Crow," Lang said, extending a hand that Crow ignored. "I got the call. I can't believe this." "Believe it, Chief," Crow said. "Your officer assaulted Agent Reed." "I'm sure it was a misunderstanding," Lang tried. wiping his brow with a handkerchief. Harlan Shaw is a veteran. He's old school, maybe a bit rough, but he gets results. Old school? Silas spoke up. He stepped out from behind Crow. Chief Lang looked at Silas. He saw the dust on the suit, the red marks on the wrists. This is Agent Reed, Crow introduced. Chief, Silas said, your old school officer profiled me, assaulted me, and illegally detained me. But here is the part that is going to interest you. Silas pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket, a printout the tech agent had just handed him. We just pulled the logs from Shaw's onboard computer. Lang blinked. What? You know how you guys are supposed to run plates through the state database? Silas said. Of course, Lang said. Shaw didn't run my plate through the state database, Silas said. He ran it through a private Discord server. Lang blinked. A what? A chat room, Silas explained. A private group called the Blue Wall. He posted my plate number and a photo of me sitting in the car. He asked the group, got a bogey at 4002 Sycamore. Black guy in a nice car messing with the neighborhood. Green light to harass. Lang's mouth opened, but no sound came out. And someone replied, Silas continued, a user named Watchman. The reply was, light him up, make him run. Silas stepped closer to the chief. This wasn't just a bad stop, Chief. This was coordinated gang activity operating inside your department. Shaw wasn't checking for warrants. He was checking with his friends if he could have some fun. The implications were nuclear. It meant Shaw wasn't a lone wolf. It meant there was a cell of officers in Oak Creek, and maybe other departments sharing targets, encouraging harassment, and bypassing legal protocols. This is impossible, Lang whispered. It's about to be national news, Crow said. We are seizing all servers at your precinct. We are seizing all personal devices of officers on that shift, and we are opening a pattern or practice investigation into the Oak Creek Police Department immediately. Lang looked at Shaw, who was watching from the window of the Suburban. The chief's face went from shock to fury. He realized his department was about to be gutted because one man couldn't suppress his ego for a short time. Can I speak to him? Lang asked. No, Crow said. He is a federal prisoner. You can speak to his lawyer if he can find one. At that moment, a sleek silver Mercedes pulled up to the perimeter. A man in a sharp navy suit got out. He carried a leather briefcase and walked with the confident stride of a man who charged a high hourly rate. That, Silas said, checking his watch, would be the lawyer. It was Harlan Beck. The Harlan Beck. He was a defense attorney known for taking high-profile cases involving police misconduct, usually defending the cops. He was the go-to fixer for the Fraternal Order of Police. Beck ducked under this tape, flashing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Gentlemen, quite a party. I represent Officer Shaw. I demand to see my client immediately. Crow blocked his path. Mr. Beck, you're fast. I have a retainer with the union, Beck said smoothly. Now, I understand there was friction between agencies. Let's not blow this out of proportion. My client made a judgment call. We can discuss an apology, perhaps a dropped charge. Silas laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Mr. Beck, Silas said, your client is currently detained under Title 18, United States Code, Section 242, and Section 111 for assault on a federal officer, and we are currently drafting charges for conspiracy to violate civil rights based on digital evidence we just seized. Beck paused. He looked at Silas, then at the tech agents cloning the laptop. The smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Conspiracy? Beck asked, his voice losing its lilt. That's a reach, Agent. Is it? Silas held up the printout of the chat log. He solicited instructions on whether to harass a citizen based on race from a private network. That is conspiracy. And since I am a federal agent, that makes it a conspiracy to impede a federal investigation. Beck snatched the paper. He read it. His eyes narrowed. He was a shark, and he just realized there was blood in the water, but it was his client's blood. I need a short time with him, Beck said, his tone serious now. You can have it, Crow said, with an agent present. Attorney-client privilege, Beck snapped. Not when the device used to commit the crime is still in the car he's sitting in, Crow countered. We are securing the scene. You can shout at him through the window. Beck walked over to the Suburban. Shaw saw him and started pounding on the glass. Get me out of here, Beck. They broke my wrist. They kidnapped me. Beck gestured for the agent to roll the window down a few inches. Harlan, Beck said, his voice low and hard. Shut up. What? You're supposed to help me. I can't help you if you keep talking, Beck hissed. They have the chat logs, Harlan. They have the blue wall chats. Shaw stopped pounding. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse. They looked at the laptop? Yes, Beck said. And because of that, this isn't a traffic stop anymore. It's a RICO case against you. Shaw slumped back against the seat. But Watchman told me to... Beck closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. Did you just identify a co-conspirator while a federal agent is standing 2 feet away holding a recorder? The agent standing guard smiled pleasantly. I'm done, Beck said, stepping back. I need to make some calls. I need to see if the union will even cover this. Intentional criminal conspiracy usually voids your coverage, Harlan. You can't leave me, Shaw screamed as Beck walked away. Silas watched the lawyer retreat. He turned to Quinn. You know what the worst part is? What? If he had just checked the badge, Silas said, I would have let him go with a warning. He would be home eating dinner in an hour. Now he's going to prison for several years. Calamity, Quinn said, spitting on the ground. We aren't done yet, Silas said, looking down the street at Councilman Lang's house. The lights in the councilman's house had just turned off. The big fish is trying to run. Shaw was just the appetizer. Silas tapped his earpiece. Tactical, this is Reed. We are pivoting. The primary target, Lang, is likely destroying evidence. We have probable cause based on the exigent circumstances created by the compromised surveillance. We are moving on the house now. Copy that, the radio crackled. Silas looked at Shaw one last time. Sit tight, officer. The show is just starting. The transition from a standoff on the street to a full-scale federal raid happened with the terrifying precision of a thunderclap. For Harlan Shaw, sitting handcuffed in the back of the FBI Suburban, the world had turned into a surreal nightmare. He watched through the tinted glass as the tactical team reformed. They weren't looking at him anymore. They were looking at the house at 408 Sycamore Drive, the home of Councilman Harlan Lang. Shaw had waved at Lang just yesterday. He had told the neighborhood watch meetings that Lang was a pillar of the community. He had spent many years patrolling this street, effectively acting as Lang's unpaid private security guard, chasing off suspicious cars to keep the councilman happy. Now he watched as Special Agent Silas Reed, the man Shaw had tried to humiliate, donned a heavy ballistic vest with FBI in bold yellow letters. Reed moved with a fluidity that Shaw, with his stiff back and bad knees, had never possessed. Breaching tools up, Silas commanded, his voice clear over the radio frequency that Shaw could faintly hear from the front seat of the Suburban. Lang is spooked. If he destroys the ledger, we lose the cartel connection. We go hard. We go fast. The team moved up the driveway. Shaw felt a sick feeling in his stomach. Cartel connection? Lang was just a zoning guy. He approved strip malls? What was the FBI talking about? Stack up, Silas ordered. 6 agents lined up against the pristine white siding of Lang's colonial mansion. Quinn was on the ram. FBI search warrant, Silas bellowed. His voice was a weapon, projecting deep and loud, shaking the windows. Open the door! Silence. Hit it. Crack. The sound of the battering ram splintering the solid oak door was sickeningly loud. It took one swing. The door flew inward. Go, go, go! Shaw watched the agents flood into the house. He saw the flash of tactical lights sweeping the foyer. He heard shouting, muffled by the walls but unmistakable in its intensity. Inside the house, chaos reigned. Silas moved through the hallway, his weapon raised. Federal agents, show me your hands! A maid screamed and dropped to the floor in the kitchen. Secure her! Keep moving! Silas signaled to the rear of the house toward the study. That was where the shredder would be. They reached the double doors of the study. They were locked. Quentin, take it! Quinn didn't use the ram this time. He used a mule kick, snapping the latch. The doors swung open. Councilman Lang was standing by the fireplace. He wasn't shredding documents. He was burning them. A metal wastebasket was in flames, smoke curling up toward the high ceiling. Lang, a man usually seen in tailored suits, was in his bathrobe, frantically feeding thick ledgers into the fire. FBI, step away from the fire, Silas shouted. Lang looked up, his eyes wild. You can't come in here. I have immunity. I'm an elected official. You're under arrest for money laundering and racketeering. Silas rushed forward. Lang tried to throw a black hard drive into the flames. Silas lunged. He didn't tackle the man. He tackled the evidence. Silas's gloved hand snatched the hard drive out of the air inches from the fire. He felt the heat sear his wrist, but he held on. Quinn hit Lang with a tackle that would have made an NFL highlight reel. The councilman hit the expensive Persian rug with a thud, the wind knocked out of him. Hands behind your back, stop resisting. I'm not resisting, Lang wheezed, his face pressed into the wool. You tried to destroy evidence in front of federal agents, Quinn growled, cuffing him. That's obstruction. Add several years to the sentence. Silas stood up, clutching the hard drive. He looked at the burning bin. He grabbed a heavy vase of flowers from the desk and dumped the water into the bin. The fire hissed and died, leaving half-burnt papers soggy but legible. Secure the scene, Silas breathed, his heart hammering. Get the fire department to check the chimney for updrafts of loose paper. I want every scrap of ash bagged. A short time later, the front door opened again. Harlan Shaw, still watching from the car, saw the impossible. Councilman Harlan Lang, the man who controlled the police budget, the man Shaw had idolized as the definition of success, was dragged out in handcuffs. He was weeping. He looked small, pathetic, and guilty. Lang saw the police cruiser in the street. He saw Shaw in the back of the FBI truck. Shaw! Lang screamed, his voice cracking. You idiot! You brought them here! You let them write to me! Shaw flinched as if slapped. Silas walked out behind the prisoner, holding the evidence bag containing the hard drive. He walked over to the Suburban where Shaw was being held. He signaled the agent to open the door. The rush of cool air hit Shaw's sweaty face. You see that, Harlan? Silas asked, pointing at the weeping councilman. Shaw nodded dumbly. That man has been laundering money for the Sinaloa cartel for many years, Silas said. He's been poisoning the city with fentanyl money, washing it through construction projects. We spent a long time building this case. We were waiting for the money drop to catch him red-handed. Silas leaned in, his eyes cold. But because you wanted to play tough guy with a black man in a nice car, the courier got spooked. We missed the money. We almost lost the hard drive. You didn't protect this neighborhood, Harlan. You protected a monster, and you almost let him get away. Shaw looked down at his hands bound in plastic. The narrative in his head that he was the thin blue line, the protector, was shattering. He wasn't the hero. He was the clown who tripped the alarm. I didn't know, Shaw whispered. That, Silas said, slamming the door, is going to be on your tombstone. The interrogation room at the FBI Chicago field office was a study in sensory deprivation. The walls were gray, soundproofing foam. The table was bolted to the floor. The air was frigid, kept intentionally cold to keep suspects uncomfortable and awake. Harlan Shaw had been sitting there for hours. His handcuffs had been replaced with steel ones, chained to the ring on the table. He was thirsty. He needed to use the bathroom. But mostly, he was terrified. The door opened. He expected his lawyer, Harlan Beck. Instead, Agent Silas Reed walked in, followed by ASAC Harlan Crow. No lawyer, Shaw demanded, his voice raspy. I invoked my right to counsel. Silas sat down, placing a thick file on the metal table. Mr. Beck is currently busy. Busy doing what? He's my lawyer. Actually, Crow said, remaining standing, Mr. Beck represents the Fraternal Order of Police. He represents the union, and as of a short time ago, the union has voted to revoke your membership and legal protection. Shaw felt the blood drain from his face. What? They can? Silas said. There is a clause in your contract regarding conduct unbecoming and criminal malfeasance. When the news broke that you were running a racial profiling ring on a private server, well, the union decided you were too radioactive to touch. They cut you loose, Harlan. You're on your own. Shaw slumped. The system he had served, the blue wall he thought would always shield him, had just dropped him off a cliff to save itself. I want a public defender, Shaw whispered. You'll get one, Silas said. But first we're going to listen to a story, your story. Silas opened the file. He pulled out photos, not of Shaw, but of the chat logs from the laptop. We cracked the encryption on the Blue Wall Discord server, Silas said. It's ugly, Harlan, really ugly. Jokes about beating suspects, competitions on who can write the most bogus tickets. But the worst part is the hierarchy. Silas tapped a photo of a user profile named Watchman. This guy, Silas said, Watchman, he's the ringleader. He tells you who to target. He gave you the order to light me up today. Who is he? Crow asked. Shaw shook his head. I can't tell you. Why not? Crow asked. Loyalty to the people who just fired your lawyer? To the people who are letting you take the fall for a federal civil rights violation? You don't understand, Shaw said, his eyes tearing up. If I talk, I'm a rat. I'm dead in prison. A cop in general population is bad. A snitch cop, I won't last a week. Silas leaned forward. His voice wasn't angry anymore. It was dangerously soft. Harlan, look at the math. You are facing several years for the deprivation of rights, another several years for the gun enhancement, another several years for conspiracy. You're looking at many years. You will be an old man when you get out. You will die in prison anyway. Silas slid a piece of paper across the table. This is a proffer agreement, Silas said. You talk, you tell us who Watchman is, you tell us every officer involved in this ring. In exchange, we recommend a reduced sentence in a minimum security federal camp. We put you in protective custody, you survive. Shaw stared at the paper. It was a lifeline, but it required him to betray the only identity he had left. I need to know I'm safe, Shaw stammered. You're only safe if you give us the head of the snake, Silas said. Who is Watchman? Shaw closed his eyes. He thought about the barbecue at the precinct last summer. He thought about the man who had clapped him on the back and told him to keep the streets clean. The man who had given him the login to the server. Shaw's voice cracked. It's Sergeant Dawson. Silas paused. The chief's brother, the shift sergeant. Yes, Shaw wept. And the chief knows. Chief Lang is overlord in the chat. They run it together. They use the tickets and the arrests to juice the stats to get federal grants. It's all a game. The silence in the room was heavy. This was bigger than a few bad apples. The entire orchard was rotten. Crow, Silas said, not taking his eyes off Shaw. Get the warrant for the chief. Silas looked back at Shaw. You did the right thing, Harlan. Finally. Does this mean I can go home? Shaw asked, a pathetic hope in his eyes. Silas stood up and gathered the files. He looked at the man who had tried to ruin him. He felt a moment of pity, but it was fleeting. No, Harlan, Silas said. It means you don't die in prison, but you're never going home, not to the life you had. Silas knocked on the door. Guard, take him to booking. In the time that followed, the federal courthouse in downtown Chicago was besieged by media vans. The headline on the scrolling ticker of the CNN van read, Oak Creek Police Scandal Sentencing Day. Special Agent Silas Reed stood on the steps adjusting his tie. The wind off the lake was cold, but the sun was bright. Beside him stood Agent Elias Quinn and ASAC Harlan Crow. Inside the courtroom, the final act of the drama had just played out. Harlan Shaw stood before the judge. He looked many years older. His mustache was gone, shaved off in county lockup. His suit was ill-fitting. He had lost considerable weight from stress. The courtroom was packed. In the front row sat his ex-wife. She wasn't there to support him. She was there with her divorce attorney to ensure the lien on his pension was finalized. She wouldn't look at him. Judge Margaret Hale, a stern woman with zero tolerance for corruption, adjusted her glasses. Mr. Shaw, she said, you have cooperated with the government. Your testimony was instrumental in the indictment of former Chief Lang and Sergeant Dawson, both of whom are now facing significant prison time. The court acknowledges this. Shaw nodded, hope rising in his chest. Maybe probation, maybe house arrest. However, the judge continued, her voice hardening like concrete, you were the spearhead of a culture of terror. You used your badge as a cudgel. You targeted Agent Reed not because of what he did, but because of who he was. You betrayed the public trust in the most visceral way possible. The judge looked at Silas sitting in the prosecution box. Agent Reed, do you have a victim impact statement? Silas stood up. He walked to the podium. He didn't have notes. Your Honor, Silas said, I am a trained federal agent. When Mr. Shaw assaulted me, I knew how to de-escalate. I knew the law. I had a team listening. Silas paused, looking directly at Shaw. But I keep thinking about the man who sat in that car before me. The teenager driving home from school. The father going to the grocery store. They didn't have a wire. They didn't have a backup team. When they met Officer Shaw, they had no voice. Today the system worked because I am part of the system. But justice shouldn't require a badge to work. Officer Shaw didn't just break the law. He broke the promise that keeps this society from falling into chaos. He needs to serve as an example that the badge is a heavy weight, not a free pass. Silas sat down. The judge nodded. Harlan Shaw, I sentence you to several years in federal prison, followed by several years of supervised release. You're stripped of your pension. You're permanently barred from holding any position in law enforcement or security. Remand is immediate. The gavel banged. It sounded like a gunshot. No, Shaw cried out as the marshals moved in. Please, I helped you. I helped you. The marshals didn't care. They spun him around, cuffing his hands behind his back. The same sound, click, click, that he had inflicted on Silas. As they walked him out the side door, Shaw looked back. He locked eyes with Silas one last time. There was no anger in Silas's eyes, just a blank professional indifference. Shaw realized with a crushing finality that he wasn't a villain in Silas's story anymore. He was just paperwork. Outside the courthouse, Silas walked down the steps. The reporters swarmed. Agent Reed? Agent Reed? How do you feel about the verdict? Is the FBI investigating other departments? Silas stopped at the microphones. He looked into the cameras. Justice was served today, Silas said. But let's be clear. This wasn't a victory. A police department was dismantled. A city councilman is in jail. A family was destroyed. This was a tragedy that could have been avoided with a short time of respect. That's the lesson. Respect the law. Respect the people, or eventually, the law will come for you. He stepped back. Quinn clapped him on the shoulder. Beer? Yes, Silas smiled. But you're buying. I'm technically still on duty until I file this final report. Deal. They walked away. Two men in suits disappearing into the city crowd. Behind them, the news screens flashed the mugshot of Harlan Shaw, a man who had everything and lost it all in a short time because he couldn't let go of his ego. The karma hadn't just hit, it had cleared the board. And that is how a short time of arrogance destroyed a lifetime of service. Harlan Shaw thought he was the predator, but he failed to realize he was swimming in an ocean with much bigger sharks. He lost his job, his freedom, and his legacy, all because he judged a book by its cover and didn't bother to read the badge inside. It's a brutal reminder, in the age of cameras and accountability, the truth always has a way of coming out. Shaw's blue wall of silence didn't protect him. It collapsed on top of him. What do you think? Did Shaw deserve the sentence? Or should it have been harsher considering he was part of a larger conspiracy? And would you have remained as calm as Agent Reed? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and justice served, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. Subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. We post real-life inspired dramas every week. Thanks for watching and stay safe out there.